Hey Ali, how are you, mate? You okay?
Yeah, not too bad, thanks. How you doing?
Yeah, good, mate. Good, good, good. And yes, for those of you who are not, of those of us who are listening who are not so familiar with what you do for Bandcamp, could you please just introduce yourself and give us a bit of an idea about what your role is?
Yeah, sure. So I'm the European and UK artist and label rep for Bandcamp. So my job is to get more people to use the site. So primarily working with labels and larger artists who are not already signed up to start using the platform. And then aside from that, I also do a lot of sort of education stuff around Bandcamp. So workshops, presentations, and generally kind of being the kind of point person between Bandcamp as a company and the music industry in Europe. So yeah, quite a varied role, but a really fun one as well.
No, sounds like it, and especially in the last year, it sounds like it's been particularly fun and a bit of a wild ride for you guys, right?
Yeah, it has been a pretty crazy year for sure. And I think it's sort of like I don't know where we kind of came from with it was it became a time where what we do and what we've always been about suddenly became something that everyone else was interested in too. So, we've always been an artist first platform. We always fundamentally believe that artists should be valued, that the art they create should be valued. And that's why Bandcamp was created. It's a way for artists and labels to sell their music, physical and digital, directly to their audience via the community that we've created at Bandcamp. And yeah, so it's kind of weird. We're exactly a year ago now, obviously, or there or thereabouts, since when sort of things sort of kicked off with COVID and the lockdowns. And we sort of decided that we wanted to underline that importance of how, artists need to be paid for their work by doing our Bandcamp Fridays. So these are our fee waiving days where we waived our regular 10 or 15% cut. And all of that money went directly to the artists for sort of, the first Friday of each month. And it's kind of weird because, we did it just as, oh, it's good to underline this point, and it'll be cool that artists understand that we're on their side, and that and that fans maybe kind of understand a little bit of the challenges facing artists now that live was switched off and some of their other kind of revenue streams. But the response was, well, overwhelming, really. I think the first one, which was March 2020, we turned over, I think it was about $4.1 million in a day.
Wow.
And,
Wow.
At that time, a regular Friday would be maybe 300,000, maybe 400,000. But, and then the second one was 7.1 million. And it kind of, that was the biggest, but it stayed at a pretty high level from there on in. So, we had 9 fee waiving days in 2020. Fans paid artists and labels $40 million with 800,000 fans taking part, which is crazy, And what I love about it is those fans could get most of that music for free. They could go on YouTube and you'd get fractions of pennies for it, but they decided to come and pay, and that's it's really rewarding, and it's a real lifeline for some artists.
Oh, massively, massively. And the thing is, I've always had that feeling from Bandcamp, having been part of a label that we had on Bandcamp for a number of years. It's an incredibly friendly place. Like, it has a much different feel. Like, some people who I talk to think I've lost my mind, because it's like, it just feels like walking into a record shop to me. Yeah. And I spent my entire life either working in or owning record shops, so I know that vibe particularly well up here in the north of England. So it's an incredible thing that you've had this kind of really beautiful environment that you've built over years. And then, similar to what happened with us with NYT, when the pandemic hit first, we felt like the world just took a giant step in our direction, and we had the infrastructure, and we had the platform to be able to deal with that and be able to help a lot more people, which I feel is a very sort of similar story for Bandcamp. So it's an incredible thing. It really, really is, and it really steps into another thing that I want to talk about, and again, that sort of re-education of artists as to the value of their art. One of the things that we've really had to do in the last year with people with, you know, a lot of our members are gigging DJs and they do pretty well and they tour, but they've had to have that re-education of, you know, your music is valuable, it has worth, and people will pay for it. So it's an amazing thing to kind of see Bandcamp really leading the charge on that, and to see so many people kind of leaning into it.
Yeah, completely. It's I think, you know, we'd kind of been on this like sort of, I think our CEO Ethan put it, we had this kind of comically steady growth curve in the sort of 11 years that we were running up until the beginning of last year, and it was very slow and steady. And, you know, we kind of approach things in a bit of a different way. Like, you know, most music tech companies, they're sponsoring lanyards at every event going, and you've got the big advertising campaigns and, you know, millions of reps and offices and all that. You know, we're a dispersed company. I'm still the only staff member, outward facing staff member in Europe. And, you know, our focus has always just been on making a really good product that actually does the job that it's meant to do. And, you know, our job is to help artists create and help them be able to afford to create more. So yeah, you know, we've had this very atypical kind of approach to things. And then, yeah, like the Bandcamp Fridays and other things that we've also done a few other kind of campaign days in the past. Like we did last year, we had the first of our Juneteenth initiatives. We waived, well, our fees. Instead of waiving them and giving them to the artists, we took our fee that we collected and passed that on to charities that support racial justice in the US. And we're going to do that every single year. You know, previously we've done fundraisers for the ACLU and the Transgender Law Centre, and we've done voter drives. So, you know, like we have this belief in artists, but, you know, where you look at that, you've got to say, well, if you're an artist first platform, that means all artists. That means that you have to support all artists, no matter their race, their gender, their sexuality, etc., etc. And that's something that we're really passionate about. And it's sort of part of the communities that we have, which is something that is shared with our community, which is really great. It's a very inspiring thing for us.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting watching a lot of artists sort of go through, like I mentioned, this education process of, you know, relearning how to kind of sell their music and have them realize that. And again, this is not a criticism of, like, say, Spotify or any sort of stream or any other platform for that matter. It's just their model is their model, and realizing that, you know, 99% or whatever it is of the royalties that are derived on Spotify are going to the top 1% of artists, and it's not very sort of representative exactly what you're saying. So what I love about Bandcamp is just the absolute clarity with the artist always knows where they stand, and it's a great deal anyway. And, you know, maybe we could sort of break that down, because I know you mentioned about, you know, waiving 10-15% fees. Like, how does the fee structure work on Bandcamp for those who are listening who are not familiar?
Sure, yeah. So it's really simple. We take 15% of digital sales, and 10% of physical sales. So that's, you know, whether that's music merch like vinyl, CDs, cassettes, etc., or you know, posters, t-shirts, all the other kind of soft goods and other things that you might sell as an artist. So 10% on physical, 15% on digital. The digital fee actually drops to 10% when you hit $5,000 in sales in 1 year, and that's kind of on a rolling basis. There's also PayPal fees on top, so all payments are processed via PayPal. You as an artist, you sign up, you enter your PayPal address, and we then send you the payments within 24 to 48 hours of the sales taking place. You can actually switch it. Some of the larger artists and labels don't want to be paid that often because it gets a lot of micropayments to manage, and the accounting becomes trickier. So you can actually choose to be paid monthly as well. But that's it. I mean, it's really simple. You know, on a Bandcamp Friday, I think on average, 93% of the money goes direct to artists, you know, once the PayPal fees and stuff are taken out. On every other, it's 82%. So it's really not, you know, a massive difference in the scheme of things. Even on a regular day, a good chunk of your money going directly to the artists and labels.
Yeah, fantastic. And again, like I just love the clarity of that because, we
Mm,
operate mostly in the electronic music world. And I know
sure.
you've run a label in dance music
Mm,
and still run one. And,
yeah.
again, not naming any names in terms of, labels or other platforms that are available to sell music. Sometimes the contract situation is actually very unclear as to who's owed what
Yeah.
and how it all kind of boils down. So I think there's almost been a kind of a is this actually real? Like, is this almost like too good to be true? Like, we know where we
Yeah.
stand and it's in our favor. So, have you ever encountered any sort of like weird resistance around that where it's like
Um,
artists are almost like distrusting of just how good a deal it is?
yeah, yeah. You know what? There is. It kind of cuts a few ways, actually. I think the thing I get more is the opposite, which is when we do try and talk to larger labels, or and we're open to work with anybody. We're not kind of like an exclusionary platform. You want to use the site, go ahead and use it. Um, but we've had some larger labels who are sort of, yeah, this is great, but what's our deal then? And you're like, well, the deal's the deal. It's the deal. It's quite a good one, as said. And it's difficult for them because a lot of those larger labels, they have kind of, that's how they prove that they exist, if you know what I mean, is to get the best deal. And it's like, you know, the large labels, they're all kind of trying to get one up on each other and get that, tiny percentage of competitive advantage. But we just don't allow for that. And we never would. The deal that you get as a bedroom artist is the same as a deal that you'd get if you were Ed Sheeran coming to use Bandcamp or anybody else, or Universal or Warner or EMI or whoever else it might be.
Hmm.
So I think that kind of democracy to it, yeah, I don't know, maybe in the earlier days, people found it a bit more like, no, that can't be right. There must be something hidden. But as you say, we're very upfront about what we do. And I think now that's kind of filtered its way through into the artistic community, which is great.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
in.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Because again, one of the things we've been really focusing on, especially in 2021 with our members, has been almost like rediscovering like the punk ethos of like
Yeah.
DIY. Put your own music out there. You don't need validation or approval from like these bigger labels as you're talking about. You
Mm.
can put your own music out there and be independently successful, and you don't have to wait to get the nod or the green light from
Yeah.
supposedly one of the gatekeepers of the industry. And that's one of the things that's really exciting about Bandcamp, is that you could build up an entire audience just on your own on Bandcamp. And just again, it's a great platform. It's almost like, and I don't mean this in a disparaging way, it reminds me of like the MySpace days to an
Yeah,
extent.
you know what? I don't take that as a slight at all. And you're not the first person to say that. I think there's two comparisons. One is, and both things you've mentioned actually. One is MySpace, and the other one is bricks and mortar record shops. We are trying to create an online equivalent of that. And I think, yeah, there was a kind of innocent sort of joy of discovery on MySpace. You just click on someone's top eight, someone in the top eight friends, and find another page, and then another and another. And I know in the same way, people will go to our discovery section on the front page at bandcamp.com and click in a random set of genres and click vinyl and from Colorado or something like that, and you get spit out some weird music you'd never heard of before, and you can kind of go on a bit of a journey. We actually do an article in our editorial platform, the Bandcamp Daily, called, I think it's called Navigator, and it's basically that same thing where the writer starts with one release, clicks on recommended albums at the bottom of the page, sees where they go, then finds the tags on that and clicks on a tag, and they kind of go on this circuit around Bandcamp and find all this kind of weird and wonderful music.
Mm.
And that ultimately is what it's about. Like, I think the type of fan we get on Bandcamp, they're music nerds. They, like all of us that work there, they love finding new music that they've not found before. They've obviously got their favorites, and we have the big artists, whether it's Bjork or Radiohead or whoever else that are using the site, but there's also this untapped kind of sea of unknown artists which you can find, and there's amazing music out there to be discovered. So it's really, Yeah, I love that. It's really exciting.
Yeah, it's almost as if, you used to fall down like a YouTube hole, you now fall
Yeah,
down a Bandcamp hole instead,
definitely, definitely. And I think there's, artists enjoy that too, because again, they can find something, as you say, without that kind of gatekeeper sort of side to it. It's just very unfiltered, and they just find cool stuff that they're going to like,
Mm.
which is great. I actually did a thing today. I for something, an internal thing at work, we had to find the first release on our Bandcamp collection. So as a fan, you can have a collection of all the music you've bought. And I went back and found the first one, which predates me working at the company, obviously. And it was really funny because I found the artist, the first release I bought, and I realized it was an artist I then went on to sign for my label, which is kind of a nice kind of circularity.
Amazing.
Yeah,
Amazing.
yeah. So, and I genuinely can't remember if I'd already decided I was signing them and then bought the thing, or whether I bought it and was like, hang on a minute, I need to speak to I honestly can't remember. But either way, it's kind of a fun story.
No, it's amazing. Amazing. It shows you how like kind of circular things can be,
Yeah, yeah,
No,
exactly.
no, absolutely. So if you had any advice for an artist who hasn't signed up for Bandcamp yet, like what would and is going through, as I say, this like kind of, for want of a better expression, a bit of an awakening around their own value, like what would you say the best route forward would be?
Okay, well, there's a few things I can recommend. First up, I would say go and check out our artist guide, which is bandcamp.com/guide, GUIDE. It's a really well written document, and it covers kind of what's really good about it is, rather than going, here's how you upload an album and here's how you add a merch item, it's like, here's some of the tools that we have, and here they're useful, and here's a few strategies for making the most out of them. So it's actually kind of like, it's very well written, and it's very practically written, as opposed to, and our health are very good for all the kind of nuts and bolts stuff as well. But a few things, just for people getting started. I think the first is designing your page and personalizing it. It's your page. Make it look as much like your own as you can. You can customize the header and the background images and all of the colors. We have this minimum pricing policy. So you put in a price, whatever you want, for what you want to charge, but you can then allow fans to pay more if they want. 50% of the time, people pay more than the minimum asked, which is amazing. And I do think that part of that is because they know it's your page. They can see that you've personalized it. Your links are on there. You've maybe, written up a little bit about why you made the release in the about this album section. You can add video as well if you've got a pro account. So I think doing all those things really helps. I think having merch, having a physical item, if you can. Obviously, vinyl is probably is our biggest physical format. We sold 2 million vinyl records last year, but we sold 500,000 cassettes last year, which is
Incredible.
crazy. It's mad. But you know what? I think and it kind of underlines my point about the importance of having merch. I'm sure that most of those people who bought those cassettes don't have a cassette player necessarily, but they just wanted, the type of fans they are, they want to have something that proves that they love this band. And that's more than just like, I streamed it 50 times last month, or I bought this file that I now own, which are both valid ways of showing you love a band. But there's a step beyond that where it's like, I've got a thing and it's in my house and it's on my shelf, and it's a sort of symbol of my love for this band, And I definitely, like, even just with my own label, I've had it before where, fans can leave a little note when they make an order. And the number of times we've had people going, this is the first record I bought, I'm getting a record player for Christmas, and this is going to be the first thing I play on it. And it's getting them into that world, which is so cool. It's like when I pass those messages on to the artists, they're just like, it's pretty kind of humbling for them, to think that someone's like getting into a whole new way of interacting with music through them as that sort of gateway. So, but yeah, I think having something physical people can buy. Cassettes are really good because you can do a run of 10. You don't have to get like 500 or 1,000 done like with records or CDs. The usual things of like T-shirts and posters are all great, but the advice I always give to people is do something that's unique to you. Like if you can have something that is a play on one of the lyrics or an album title or a track title or something that kind of comes from your own particular culture. If you're from a particular place or a particular scene, I mean, little things like we have an artist on our label called Children of Zeus, who are a hip hop soul act from Manchester, and their last album was called Travel Light, and we got lighters done that said Travel Lighter on them. It's a pretty weak pun, but they were like a couple of £3, really cheap, easy for people to buy, and people loved them because it was like, maybe they don't want to spend 20 quid on a record, but they do want to have this little thing, and then that's part of the connection that they're making with you. Beyond just making money, it's also about you having that direct connection with your fans. So we have messaging tools, so you can send them messages. They will get automatic updates every time you release a new track or a new album. So I think building that one-on-one kind of relationship with your fans, that's something that's very hard for you to do via other platforms. I mean, even if we look at Spotify, for example, and this is no bashing of them whatsoever. Like, I'm sure most people listening probably use Spotify or another tool, and for fans, they are a pretty good deal. Do you know what I mean? Like, I get it, but for an artist, you're always trying to get on playlists, right? That's the sort of the aim, the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, or whatever it might be. Now, that can make you money, and it can grow your fan base. Like, I know from my own label, we do well out of tracks being on playlists. But if you're on a playlist, someone could listen to you, and if they don't happen to look at their phone while you're on, they don't even know they listen to you. It was just a thing that happened while they were doing something else. So not only do you not know who they are, they don't even know who you are either, and they might never know. Now, obviously, it's part of growing your audience and all of that, so I appreciate it. I'm not saying it's without merit. However, when you're directing fans to use Bandcamp, they're then following you as an artist. You can then message them. They can also opt in to join your email lists. You can then email them too. So it's giving you more opportunities to actually build a fan base that's going to stay with you, for the long haul. And you're not, I think we're seeing that more and more with, even outside of Bandcamp, things like Patreon and subscription models or Discord servers. People want that direct connection, and I think they find that social media is too overwhelming and too caught up in other things to really deliver that. So I think there's an element of that with Bandcamp too. So yeah, I mentioned design, I've mentioned selling merch. I think the other thing I'd say is one of our new features, the live streaming feature that we have. So we have a ticketed live streaming platform, Bandcamp Live, where you can live stream direct from your Bandcamp page. And the cool thing is you can sort of curate a virtual merch table underneath the streaming window so people can buy your music while they're watching the show. And there's a chat room and other stuff too. And it's a really good product. People have been using it a lot. We've had over 100 shows now, over 10,000 tickets sold. The interesting thing for me is that these stats are now a month or so old, but at that point we'd done $100,000 in ticket sales, but $50,000 in merch and music sales alongside it. So that's really interesting. One thing I would note is that we're sort of set up for you to perform your own music. It's not there as a DJ streaming platform. Yeah. I'd recommend Mixcloud or there's plenty of other options out there that people know for that. But if you're able to do production of your own tracks, I mean, we've had people doing listening parties. The cool bit, I mean, part of what we wanted to do with it was, this time last year when there was the first lockdown was happening and people started doing live streaming. And I think, people may remember the Laura Marling show, which was done at the Union Chapel in Islington. Beautiful building, legendary place to perform. Amazing show from Laura Marling. Loads of people bought tickets. It was brilliant. But actually, if you're a DIY artist, it's a bit off-putting because you don't have the Union Chapel and you don't have a film crew and lighting and all of that stuff that made that show so special. What you do have is you can invite your fans into your world and into your home, essentially, as well, if you want to. And the best shows I've seen on Bandcamp Live have been the ones that are totally relaxed. People are in their home studio. They're just kind of hanging out. They're just talking with their bandmates. They're answering questions from the chat, taking requests, shouting people out. and you're then giving people something that they wouldn't get if they were coming to a show in person. So there's a real power in that. And again, that intimacy that I spoke of, you're getting that direct relationship with your fans. So I think that's another thing that's definitely worth exploring if you're kind of new to Bandcamp.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, it can be
Absolutely.
a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I love the innovation behind it, where it's not just like a straight, we're a music sales platform, that's what we do. Like, it's kind of the cornerstone of a whole suite of very artist-centric services that are designed, to really optimize what artists can do with both themselves, their fan bases, and their art as well, which is just a fantastic thing. It really is much needed as well. And just sort of to circle back on what you were saying about merch and stuff, like, I'll give you an example about what we did with our label Chapter 24. We had an in-house illustrator who lived in Copenhagen in Denmark, and we chose him deliberately because we loved his work, but also because he did everything physical. It wasn't digital art. It was all like, he used to carve it out of like lino, basically.
Oh, wow.
So it was like we loved the correlation between the cutting of vinyl and him actually carving out of the lino. So it would all be like rolled onto like rice paper and printed and stuff, but we sold the originals on our Bandcamp page. And it really kind of awakened us towards, like, the art as an artifact of its own. Like, if you were talking like an Indiana Jones movie, you'd call it the MacGuffin. Do you know what I mean? Like, the Ark of the Covenant and all that stuff. And that's the thing as well. Like, because like, it's amazing. Again, just not to talk about sort of Spotify in too sort of disparaging terms, I just find the whole model really passive, and it does, in an almost kind of unconscious way, strip the value away from the art itself. And as I say, the last year has been really fascinating, watching people sort of really reawaken to that. And also, like, not to turn this into a whole conversation about the buzz topic of NFTs at the moment.
Sure.
That is also a very big manifestation of people realizing the value of what they create. And I think Bandcamp actually sits very, very well into that kind of future. So it's going to be fascinating. I mean, where do you feel like Bandcamp's going in the next sort of 5 years or so, and what kind of place do you feel like it's going to take in the industry?
I think it's going to be interesting to see. I think what's been really good is, or say been really good, it's obviously been an awful year for so many people, but one of the positives that's come out of it is, not just with Bandcamp, but a lot of artists sort of stopping and thinking, like, because it's so easy when you're an artist or a label, you just get into that cycle, record, release, tour, and you don't stop and think why you're doing any of it. And it kind of becomes an end in itself rather than, part of your creative process or part of whatever it was that drew you to want to create music in the first place. And I think so many people have kind of, it's given them space to think. I mean, you mentioned kind of working DJs and touring DJs that kind of, that you work with a lot. I've got friends of mine who would have been out gigging 2, 3, 4 times a week, and they've been doing it for 10 years. And suddenly they realize, like, I'm killing myself here. Like, I am physically and mentally, I can't do this forever. And so things like, using Bandcamp more, live streaming, Patreon, all these kind of things suddenly become things that, like, actually, you know what? I've got a lot of other skills that go beyond me just turning up and playing my hour set at, 1 till 2 in Leicester and then 3 till 4 in London and then getting home, or whatever it might be. And I think that's, I think there's going to be some skills we've all learned this year that are going to stick. And I'm hopeful that Bandcamp will be one of those. I think in terms of what we're doing, plans for the future, like, really, it's just what we've always been, which is helping artists. That's it. We help artists, they get paid, and then we get paid a little bit. That's the business model. It's really simple. So I think there's still going to be an awful lot of scope for that. I think, I see it's going to be more about physical sales. I think that's kind of the trend that we're seeing. It's kind of more and more based on physical, but the download is not dead yet either, for sure. But I think that's going to be a big part of it. But for us, it's just having being a key part of artists and labels campaigns. That's what we're seeing that we're becoming, and I'd like to think that will continue into the future.
Yeah, totally. And the versatility of the platform as well, because I've seen a lot of people, not just selling music downloads as well. I mean, one of the things that, and there's so much to touch on about what you've just said there, because not only have our established sort of touring DJs said very similar things to us in terms of like, I can't do this forever, and I don't want to be like, 70 hanging out the back end of a nightclub while my grandkids come and watch me DJ. It's that kind of thing. But also a lot of the newer artists who are coming through are like, I don't want that life. I'm not interested in that life. I want to sit in my studio and make music. Like, that's what I want to do. And whether or not it's engineering for other people, doing mixing and mastering, or releasing my own stuff, I want to be able to earn a sustainable living from that, and I should be able to. But actually, we've pointed a lot of people down the route of sample packs, because they sell really, really well. So I've noticed a lot of people on Bandcamp selling sample packs as well, and that seems to do really well on the platform as well.
Yeah. There's a friend of mine, a producer called Om Unit. He did a sample pack for his stuff, and he put it on Twitter. Like, he was just like, something about what he'd heard from other things. He was like, "Yeah, that's paid for my double glazing this year in my house." So it's like, fair play. That's a tangible thing that's come from using the platform and using it in that way. I definitely think that. And I mean, it's an interesting thing, because I think quite often what you find within electronic music in particular, I think, is you quite often have quite introverted characters that make music. And then the only way they can make money out of it is to go and be in these wildly extroverted kind of places, i.e. in clubs, at festivals. And that then their discomfort with that can then lead to quite unhealthy behaviors and quite unhealthy ways of living, and it's a real problem for people, because, and that's why, it's age old story of, whether it's drink or drugs or anything else, and these things are, it can be fun for a little while, and then it can become problematic, and it can ultimately be very damaging for you as an individual. So I think, finding more than, part of what Bandcamp is just finding more than one way of doing all of this stuff, because, we tend to treat artists as though they're all the same. Oh yeah, you do this campaign, you put this out on this day, and 3 weeks later you do this, and then we do this, and then we have this content, and blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, that might work for one person, but it might not work for the next person. And, we as an industry, there's a responsibility to try and A, look after our artists, but B, find more ways for them to succeed and be sustainable, as you say.
Absolutely. And it excites me from that perspective of mental health as well, and just wellness in general. I do a lot of work with AFEM. I sit on their health group, and I've done a lot of work with them in the past, and just to see not only that, for that to be a good financial kind of, again, sustainable revenue stream, it actually enables the type of lifestyle that people want to live. And I think that's just incredibly beautiful. And again, what makes it even more beautiful is from the simplicity that you come at it from, which is so badly needed. And yeah, I mean, in terms of other artists, like I know artists on the platform who have been very, very clever, and this might be an interesting conversation actually, been very clever about the contracts that they signed initially when they released stuff on labels, and they've managed to actually reclaim a lot of their master rights, and then re-released them, self-released on Bandcamp. And I know, some artists who are now literally paying the rent and more just off their Bandcamp, because thankfully at a very early stage of their career they had good advice about what the contracts were saying about terms and territory and stuff like that as well, and they were able to claim back their IP effectively and be able to monetize it for themselves.
Yeah, I think that's, we see a lot of that as well, and one of the good things again about Bandcamp is, if you're an artist on a label, and you have your artist page, which you have control of, and then you become a member of the label, and they upload the release, and it's on your page, but it pays the label. When your contract runs out, you can literally, the label just goes in the back end, clicks the payment details, drop down, and changes it to you, and then you get the money, and you don't have to re-upload it or anything. And also, all those fans whose collections it in, it stays there. It's not like it's going to get removed. So it's really, really easy to reassign rights, which is important. And it's, you know, like you say, I think labels are waking up to the fact that they can't always have the, like, if they want, you know, to sign something in perpetuity or for like 25 years or whatever, they've got to give something for that, you know, like they've got to be really providing something. Now, not to say that there aren't deals where that would actually be very beneficial for an artist. You know, I you know, aside from my Bandcamp work, you know, just with what I do with my label, like the way I see it is there are a bunch of jobs that need doing for any release, and someone's got to do those jobs. And there's loads of different ways of doing it. You can self-release, you can use a label services company, you can run your own label, you can sign to a small label or a bigger label. But all the same jobs are getting done. You know, there's some artists I know who are very successful and have no manager because they don't need one, because they're on top of it. They've got a good booking agent, great relationship with their label, all fine. Whereas other artists who could barely get out of bed without their manager being there. Do you know what I mean? So my point being is, I think it's about having the deals that suit you. And, you know, I mean, I do some artist mentoring, and one of the sort of exercises I get some of the participants to do is to basically write down on index cards everything that they do to do with their music career. So from booking rehearsal room to, you know, getting their trains booked, to doing their social media, to getting photographs, all of it, put it on index cards, and you kind of lay it out into sections, and you sort of get a good idea of like what you do. And then you can then kind of give yourself a bit of an audit and assess, like, what am I good at? What am I bad at? What do I like? What do I not like? What do I do but would really rather someone else did it? And then that gives you can then make an informed decision about who you want to work with, who you need to work with, what terms it should be on. And that all feeds into what you're saying. It's like, it's about getting that right advice, or equipping yourself to make good decisions so that your future is protected, rather than just kind of signing it all away. And then if it goes wrong, that's that, you're kind of done, you know? So yeah, I think, you know, all of that kind of artist education and giving more options and more power to artists, it doesn't mean that's the end of labels. It just means that they're getting, it's a more reciprocal arrangement than maybe things were in the past.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it puts the emphasis back on, as you were saying, like artist development, which again is something that's kind of been, you know, either made the reserve of like the truly major label signing, or, you know, people who have had the money behind them to be able to do that in the first place. You know, I've noticed in the last sort of 15 years or so, there's been progressively less and less like real A&R happening, and less sort of true artist development, which, you know, you can have your opinions on whether or not you think it's affected the quality of the output of labels or not, but sure, it's still a very, very important part of the process, as more and more of these tasks have been progressively more and more heaped on the artist. You know, if you look at that, I mean, imagine what the index cards would look like for the Beatles, for example.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, it'd look completely different to what it is now. So, you know, regardless of whether we're talking about this in the context of Bandcamp, it's like that's actually a really great exercise for every artist listening to this and watching this now to do.
Yeah, no, I think so. And I think it's, you know, it's also like there's, I think it can be quite overwhelming for artists. There's so many options and so many things you think you should be doing. And like, let's be honest, no one got into making music because they wanted to be really good at social media. Like that's not, you do it because you love music and you want a different career, a different life for yourself. But then we get drawn into all of this admin, and it's like, you know, when at first you can sort of say, well, it's you know, the ends justify the means. But then if it just becomes an end in itself, where you're just like feeding the social media machine and the dreaded word content, you know, like, as opposed to just focusing on your craft. I mean, you know, I agree what you say in terms of like artist development. And, you know, it's another thing, like, no one expects art, or we shouldn't, let me rephrase that, we shouldn't expect artists to be fully formed and perfect from minute one. Like, you've got to pay your dues. You know, no one becomes like, well, not no one, very few come straight out the bat, like, and the first thing they do is like genius level, whatever. That's, you know, those are your kind of generational talents. But it's perfectly possible to have a long and fruitful career in music through graft, through, you know, some talent, but then also just application to your craft and like really like focusing on improving yourself. And you know, and to do that, you need that assistance in those early years. You need to be able to have the financial support one way or another. And you know, we want the situation where it's not just the preserve of people with rich parents or something. It's got to be for everybody. So a lot of challenges there. And you know, if we can help on any elements of those, then obviously we're really happy to.
No, absolutely. And I think that really brings a really interesting point about, you mentioned it very briefly before, but the power of email. And this is something that we really encourage, like the people who we work with and our members, to do this. And it's something we've benefited from as a business, you know, as well, of building up a list of like really engaged people who have opted in to actually hear from you. You know, and again, you cast that against, you know, sort of, shall we say, you know, spraying and praying like an AK-47 content on all sorts of platforms, hoping that somebody might see it. Like it's the digital equivalent of putting a message into a bottle, rolling it out to sea, and hoping somebody sees it on the other side. You know, you've got that ability to really streamline that through the fact that you're putting good music out there, but you're building up a list that you can speak to 100% of at any time, rather than, I mean, you know, we went through that whole phase, didn't we, about a decade ago, when it was all about like how many likes you had on Facebook. And then the realization comes about 2 or 3 years later. It's like, oh, all of that belongs to Facebook. Like, like we don't own that at all. And in fact, it's quite an empty number in a lot of ways, where now if you've got that email list built up, you can really adopt physically and truly in reality that 1,000 true fans theory of, you don't have to speak to everyone, you just got to have to speak to the people who were asked about you.
Completely. And that's the thing that I think, you know, technology has enabled us to do, is that you can sort of thrive as a real niche artist, because, you know, you don't need to physically be in the same space as your fans. They can be spread all over the world, but if they're really dedicated and really into what you do, then great. I mean, you know, one of the things, we do have a subscription part of Bandcamp. So, you know, everything, people pay a certain amount a month, and then they get everything that you release. And some of the biggest ones, like sort of most successful subscriptions on there, are bands I've never heard of. They're like, particularly like the sort of jam band scene in the US, which I'm really not familiar with. But you have people who've got thousands and thousands of supporters. And these bands are just like, every gig they do, they record it and they upload it, and the fans love it. And it's like 3-hour sets, and that's people just really, really into it. So yeah, you know, I think that's it. It's about finding what works for you and making that, you know, making the industry work for you rather than the other way around. You know, that's the kind of kicker, and it's hard, but it is possible.
Yeah, I think, and again, another part of the sort of the awakening, as I keep calling it in this call. I've never called it that before we started this conversation, so I don't know where that's come from. Like I sound like some sort of like spiritual guru or something. But yeah, please buy my course. It's only £1,000. Yeah, but basically, you know, it's interesting you say about the jam bands. That almost sounds like the 2021 version of like the Grateful Dead or something like that, doesn't it? Like
it's in that sort of realm. Yeah, definitely. And it's it's a real eye-opener. You find all sorts of things in this job.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. And it's interesting because, like, as I was going to say, I think it's really helping people to understand that there's lots of different ways of making it. And you know, just because, like, say for example, take a dance music thing, it's like, just because you don't end up being like, you know, the next Carl Cox, for example, that doesn't mean you're a complete failure. In fact, it's about, like, I had Katie on this podcast a few weeks ago, and we talked about a lot of the challenges, like going, like, you know, threading this through mental health a little bit as well, of like, we all go through this of like never feeling like we're enough and taking on way too much than we should do, because we're kind of told that that's how you quote unquote make it, rather than meeting the industry on your own terms and saying, well, actually, I'm going to get really clear about where I want to be, what that looks like you were saying as well, with like doing those kind of audits of like the cue cards and stuff, getting really clear on that, and then moving in that direction. And it's really fascinating speaking to you about this. This is why I love having these conversations, is that these contexts come out that we don't necessarily consider beforehand. But it's like, I would literally say to people, like, Bandcamp is probably going to be like a net positive for your mental health as well as your financial health as far as the industry is concerned, because it's an incredible thing to feel like somebody's actually on your side.
Yeah, and I think it's the directness with the fans as well. Like, if you're an artist and you sign up for your account, when you get a sale, you'll get an email saying, cha-ching, someone just bought your thing. And, it's kind of like a little sappy and whatever. But when that's money that's directly going to pay for your meals or your rent or your mortgage or whatever it might be, that's brilliant. Like, it's, and like, I mean, I remember having it with my own label where we did, they do the indie label markets where they get record labels to come down and sell their music. They've done them all over the place now, but I was at one of the first ones that we did with my label in London, and there was a guy sort of browsing records on the stall, and I was like, "Oh, all right, what sort of stuff are you into?" And he's like, "Oh, I like hip hop and soul." I was like, "Oh, well, there's this you might like." He's like, "Oh yeah, I've got that." I was like, "Really?" He went, "Yeah." I was like, "Oh." And it had sort of not occurred to me that obviously someone's bought them, otherwise they'd all still be in my house. But it's like when you see a person who's like, you don't know, it's not like your mate or your mum or something who's actually gone out and spent their money on buying your release. It's great. It feels good to know that someone likes what you've created enough to go and pay for it. And they know about it and they want to come and find out more. And I think that's one of the things that Bandcamp gives you, is that directness. Fans can leave their little reviews that appear underneath the pack shot of your record, or just people paying that more than the minimum. It's just so brilliant. Like, I know of a few people who sort of emailed a fan saying, "You put in 50 quid. Did you mean that?" And they're like, "Yeah, I did." Like, "Oh, thanks. Okay, cool." Because you think, "Oh God, have they just put the decimal point in the wrong place or something at the checkout?" But it happens for sure. So I think, I definitely, I think there is part of that's very true. It's that gratification that you need to keep going as an artist that's also really important. It's easy to just be sort of, we're all just sat at our laptops in different houses, just sending emails and making stuff and uploading things and downloading them again and all of that. And it's sort of, having those kind of breaks where you're allowing yourself to get a bit of praise and a bit of an accolade is important.
No, totally, yeah. And I think this is one of the real, again, horrible year for everyone, but I think this is one of the real positive shifts that's happened. And I can tell by the way the culture's gotten behind it that this is going to be something that's going to stick even after the pandemic. That kind of whole thing of, I think that the message has been heard loud and clear that we need platforms like this. Platforms like this do exist, and they are on your side. And even when things start to open up again, we can, like we were saying before, we can lead much more balanced lifestyles and not have to run ourselves into the ground doing live performances, because that's the only way to make money. So I've just got to take a moment just to applaud you guys and the team, because it's so in alignment with what we're all about. And our whole thing is like, you can't become the best artist you can be without becoming the best version of yourself.
Yeah, very true.
And we work with people on a whole 360 of that, from music marketing. I mean, daft things like, we've got 5 hours of yoga classes on our platform if you've been sat in the studio all day and your hips are tight, things like that. Like, we don't leave a stone unturned. And it's surprising the amount of middle-aged white DJs, like, on a Sunday, like, will come down and, like, get into a yoga pose with you. Like, it's really interesting. So you'd never have thought it, like, after 20 years in a nightclub, like, they're all there doing down with dogs on a Sunday morning.
Probably the people that need it most, right? I guess.
Well, yeah, exactly. You go where you're most needed. Like, I'm like the Mother Teresa of DJs. You know what I mean? Like, go and help the ones who need them the most. So I mean, it's just fantastic. Like, so in closing, is there any sort of final advice of how, once you've signed up for your account and everything, like, how would you get the most out of Bandcamp? Is there a place where you can be featured? Is there any sort of best practices on how to promote your stuff on Bandcamp?
Yeah, definitely. So we do have places to be featured. We have our written editorial, which is called the Bandcamp Daily. We've got 5 editors based in New York and about 100 freelance writers all over the world, and their job is to just cover the breadth of great music on the site. So we do like full features, which are generally about albums, which would be like interviews or, you know, a kind of in-depth thing. We do like scene reports sometimes as well. But we also do like albums of the day. We have our new and notable section with just little one-liners that we put a few of them up a day. And then there's also monthly columns for, you know, electronic, jazz, soul, punk, reissues, ambient. There's a bunch more that we do. So pitching stuff into our editorial team is really worth doing. There's actually instructions on that in the guide that I mentioned before. So bandcamp.com/guide. If you click on the promotion button, there's a section about the Bandcamp Daily and how to submit. But the key things, send us stuff early. Ideally, if you want a full feature, which is going to be around an album, 8 or 9 weeks. If it's just a new and notable or album of the day, 4 or 5 weeks is fine. We get a couple of thousand pitches a week and we post 4 stories a day. So it's tough, but not impossible. What I would say is that if you're pitching for a full feature, it's about stories. It's about music that's not just great to listen to, but is great to write about and great to read about. Not everyone's going to have that, and that's fine. You know, you can pitch for album of the day or you can pitch for one of the columns. If it's just you've made a great EP of, you know, straight ahead dance floor music or whatever it is, where it's just really good music, that's fine. We will cover that, of course, if we can. But if you're going for a full feature, it's about the type of story, something interesting, why you made the record, how it was made, who you collaborated with. Trying to build a narrative, I think, is really important, and actually kind of leans into what fans want as well. You know, like the kind of cool elevator pitch. You know, it's not about distilling your music or cheapening it, but it's just about giving people who don't already know who you are something to grab onto, an easy way of understanding what it is and going, actually, yeah, that sounds interesting. I'm going to give it a listen. So we have all of that. We want pitches via Bandcamp links only. They can be private. You don't have to publish your album. Just copy and paste the URL. We all have admin accounts and we can see your music. In that promotion section on the guide, it's got email addresses of our editors. So it advises you who to send what, depending on what genre that you're releasing. We also have 3 radio shows. We have the Bandcamp Weekly, which goes up every Tuesday on the site. And that kind of covers jazz, soul, electronica, world music, that sort of stuff. We also have fortnightly shows alternating on Fridays for metal and hip hop, specialize in those 2. So again, you can submit your music for those 2. For those, we always have a featured artist that we interview. We do a bespoke illustration of the artist as well. So you get a really good kind of quality featuring there. But yeah, send us your Bandcamp links. Don't send Dropbox links. Don't send SoundCloud links. Just the Bandcamp one. And just a short 2 paragraphs. This is me. This is who I am. This is what this record is. Nothing wrong with saying, could you pass this on to your electronic columnist? Or I think this writer who wrote about this artist that I toured with last year might be interested in this. But, you know, usual advice, keep things brief, keep things polite, you know, don't bombard people with information, just make it easy for them to find your music. And in this instance, it's just sending us the Bandcamp links. But yeah, go and check it out in the guide because it's really useful. And like I say, you can choose which of our editors most suits what you're making and make sure that the right person gets it.
Yeah, I love that. I love that for a couple of reasons because, you know, like again on a personal level, like our label Chapter 24, our strapline was stories in sound, and like cool. Being like a narratively driven label, and also, you know, with what we do at NYT, we try and get people into the thought process of like, what is your music actually about? Like, why are you writing this? Why are you even bothering? You know, get really clear on that. And that is a massive thing in terms of, like, say, for example, pitching for, like, you know, editorial and stuff like that, as you mentioned. So it's hugely beneficial on that scale. And the other thing I'll just say is I absolutely love the way the guides are written because, quite frankly, like, there's been moments reading a lot of your stuff on the website where I've laughed out loud legitimately.
They are very good. Yeah.
And like you were saying before, the whole cha-ching thing, it's like, you know, I might, you know, some people might think that's a bit cheesy. I think it's brilliant. And it's just another little kind of signifier of, like, you know, we are on your side here because we've got the same sense of humor as you as well, you know?
Yeah. No, I think the tone of that has been really good from day one. And like the people that I work with that do all that stuff are very good. Even the help documents are well written, which is not always the case, obviously. So we do try and keep it kind of human and personal as much as we can. And like the guide's really good, and we're trying to sort of have more information like that on the site, so there's more kind of wider different ways of approaching the different tools that we have. Because one of the things you'll find if you start using Bandcamp is there's so many tools in there, but they're maybe not immediately obvious at first glance. It takes a while for you to kind of drill in and go, oh right, you can do that here.
Yeah, it's like quite deep actually once you get into it, like the IRC codes and everything. Like it's proper deep, like.
Totally. And we're chart registered now, so if you add UPC codes, your albums will count towards the charts in like UK, US, and Australia, for example. And there's loads of little bits and pieces in there. So and I think also as well, one thing I'd say is that in terms of like when you're getting started with it, like any other platform or social network or whatever, the more you put in, the more you're going to get out. And the more that you factor Bandcamp as part of your process for releasing music, sometimes it's easy for it to become an afterthought because it's dealt with in a different way. And I understand that, that's not being like, judging people, because I get it. It's like when you're an artist, particularly if you're independent, got a lot to think about, a lot of different, balls to keep up in the air, and all of that is hard. But I think it's worth kind of just making sure that you factor in Bandcamp, the timelines involved, and the more you put in, the more you put up, the more success you'll get for sure.
Yeah, totally. And just as a final point, I think it's a great one about being clear on what platforms serve which audience. Yes. And what kind of content is going to work, or what kind of music is going to work on which platform, or what kind of approach, because there's room for all of them. And I think again, like in electronic music, obviously Beatport's been the sort of the main focal point for a number of years, and rightly so, because they're very, very good at what they do. I mean, they're friends of mine. But now it's like you've got a whole range of different options. It's not everyone competing to be like, the one platform to rule them all. They're all going to have places, they're all going to have value, and they're all going to have distinct audiences that they're all going to speak to.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's something, I get asked that quite a lot. It's like, oh, should I just put my stuff on Bandcamp? I'd never recommend someone to do that. Like, if you're an emerging artist, you've kind of got to have your music everywhere that people might find it. But you can decide where you send people to. And your existing fans, you can decide where you would rather they bought it from. Bandcamp really does well on that score because, A, you're earning more money, but B, you're getting that data that you mentioned before as well, which is for building an audience and building a fan base over time. It's so important.
Yeah, it's huge. It's huge. Well, I just want to thank you for your time, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure meeting you and having this conversation.
Yeah, likewise. Really enjoyed that. It's always good to chat about music, and I'm really lucky to have this job, and especially this last year to actually feel that you're helping people out. It's I couldn't do this job for other companies, I don't think, because I wouldn't believe in them. You know what I mean? So I'm always more than happy to talk about it with people. It's great.
No, I appreciate it. Thanks very much for your time, mate. I'll speak to you soon.
Cool. Cheers.
Catch new episodes of Beyond the Studio every single week on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you enjoy your podcasts.